Hi everybody, I'm Anish Andheria. I work with the Wildlife Conservation Trust. I'm here to tell you why I trust tigers so much. Let's go back in time. 2005, Bandipur Tiger Reserve. I was collecting data to understand the diet of tigers, leopards, and wild dogs. To understand how these carnivores could coexist in such high densities in one landscape. One such morning, I was walking a transit looking for indirect evidences of these carnivores with a Kurba assistant Mada. And the road was winding. I knew I was heading towards a stream and I was looking forward to it. I love water, I love the gurgling sound of water and the associated sounds of birds. It's just such a oasis inside a forest. And as we approached the stream and we were at the cross section, instinctively I looked towards the left to check for some life and then turned right. And there she was, an adult tigress, not even 7 meters from where I was. Immediately I told my assistant to freeze and not to panic. At that point, the tigress had not seen us. But within the next 6 or 7 seconds, she turned her head and was equally stunned to see two human beings less than a leap away. Instead of coming towards us, he crouched and gingerly melted into the forest behind her. Even today, when I think of that morning, it takes me back to Bandipur. Such a fascinating phase of my life where I had very close interaction with wild animals. I walked hundreds of kilometers of that beautiful forest. In fact, I've been walking in many of our fantastic forest areas across the country and have plethora of sightings. And whenever I discuss, especially those tiger sightings which I've had on foot with colleagues, with forest guards who we interact with quite a bit, pretty much everybody unanimously says that the tigers really don't care about human beings. They're just not interested in us. However, the knowledge that we have gathered about these magnificent carnivores has gone a long way in helping not only the government but also the scientists to build strategies around conservation, not only of tigers but of large ecosystems, landscapes, and whole of biodiversity. I trusted in tigers since probably last 35 years that I've started going to the forest. But not only me, even the government back in 1970 realized that if they were to stabilize the ecosystems, especially the forest ecosystems of India, they will have to take support of tigers. I'm talking about early 1970s when Project Tiger was launched by the late Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who knew that tiger had the ability to bring the world together. When Project Tiger was launched in 1973, there were only 9 tiger reserves. Today, as I talk to you, we have 50 tiger reserves in India, and nearly 2.3% of our country is tiger reserve. We also have many protected areas. And I believe that what Project Tiger did back then is extremely important. It started off a positive cascading effect of declaration of several threatened ecosystems. Today we have nearly 880 protected areas, which means national parks, sanctuaries, conservation reserves and community reserves, over 600 national parks and sanctuaries, and 50 tiger reserves. What have we achieved in the last 47 years? A lot. Without Project Tiger, without declaration of those parks, India would not have been able to boast of perennial rivers, of mountains which are extremely important for providing water to huge swaths of agricultural land. Millions of people depend on agriculture, and all of agriculture in the peninsular India is dependent on surface water, and mostly all of that surface water originates from forests which either support tigers or some other wildlife. So tigers have been showing us the way to conserve large landscapes. Initially, we largely believed in protectionism, which means there was a belief that you need to create inviolate spaces, get people out from those areas, and create a safe haven for wildlife. Well, it worked. There were some shortcomings of that paradigm. People did feel alienated. However, it allowed scientists to study animals that bounce back. A lot of study went into the kind of understanding we have today. A lot of scientists study tigers and other carnivores. And we have a lot more information on what they eat, how much area they need, what is their interaction with other species, prey, how do they behave in areas which are disturbed, how do they behave in presence of human beings. In fact, I sometimes joke that we know more about tigers than tigers know about themselves. And apart from allowing us to protect such large landscapes in India, it has also allowed us to understand that for a stable tiger population, you also need good quality corridors that connect these protected areas with each other. So as our understanding of the tigers grew, conservationists moved out of protected areas into landscapes that were multiple use habitats. They supported large populations of human beings, but also had enough room for wild animals. The conservation efforts shifted. So tigers were guiding us. First, they told us how to protect the parks, and they told us that the parks have to be big. And when you have big parks, you obviously have better quality catchment, and therefore the rivers are strengthened much more. Similarly, they also guided us that when you protect these parks and the populations go up, there is dispersal, and that tigers move out. And as they move out, they get into areas which are not as good as protected areas. But even in 2020, nearly 25% of all tigers of India live outside the protected area network of India. Which means if we needed to conserve the species in the country, we had to focus not only on the protected areas, but also these forests outside. And when we talk of conservation of large carnivores, mind you, adult tiger can weigh about 250 kgs. And a leopard, generally, a male leopard will weigh about 55 to 60 kgs. So you can imagine the size difference of these two carnivores. So when you're talking about tigers in multiple use areas, you're talking serious business, which means you have to somehow do a balancing act between livelihoods of people, safety of people, and of animals. And so tigers actually taught us how to manage these areas, how to look at rural development without shortchanging wildlife. And that understanding has come a long way. And in fact, several wonderful habitats exist outside protected areas today in several parts of our country: Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Uttarakhand, parts of Karnataka. And while there is some amount of conflict, people are largely coexisting with these carnivores. With that understanding, the government realized that they have to somehow equip these people to insulate themselves from large carnivores, which means they needed street lights. That meant that they needed good quality sanitation. By the way, sanitation, you feel, is not the responsibility of the forest department or conservationists, but research studies have shown that the conflict between humans and tigers escalate during the evening or very early in the morning when the carnivores are active, and that's the time when people go for open defecation. And so just by providing toilets to these remote villages, you can really bring down the incidents or the interactions between large carnivores and people, and therefore have a very huge impact on attacks. And so conservation is teaching how to do rural development. So tigers are a guarding light. They have also taught us that when we talk of protected areas, you definitely need inviolate spaces, and you cannot compromise on the quality of those protected areas. So the government came up with a beautiful idea, and that is to provide handsome packages, financial support to people who want to voluntarily move from these protected areas to areas which are better connected to small towns, or at least close to a highway or a railhead. In one way, those cores of tiger reserves started becoming inviolate, and people benefited in a big way because they had better opportunities for livelihood. So it was a win-win. When we started studying tigers outside protected areas, we also realized that those habitats are just not supporting tigers, but they have so many other life forms which even scientists were not aware of. For instance, our study in central India has shown that the habitats that the tigers occupy also is home to so many different species: wolves, jackals, hyenas, ratel, pangolin. When we put camera traps in such large landscapes, we get a lot of information about these species as well. As a result, we are able to give vital information to the forest department about how we should integrate conservation into rural development, also conservation of different species in a landscape. So tiger has led a way, has shown us the way, and now we have to capitalize on it and use similar methodologies to protect different species. And these camera traps are giving us some great insights on these species. One important information that we get out of these camera traps is that when we talk of corridors, how frequently are these animals using them, and how important are corridors to wildlife? And that brings us to another solution. For instance, today India is developing at a very fast rate. We have the second largest road network on earth, and people believe that within the next 10 years we'll probably have the largest road network on earth, which means there'll be many more roads, even more railways, and that will cut the existing corridors. Because there is huge amount of data on a national level, India conducts tiger population estimation across an area or across a tiger habitat of 350,000 square kilometers. That kind of fine-grained information that we are collecting in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh is telling us how linear infrastructure like roads and railways can really hamper movement of animals, and which is very, very important for stabilizing our protected areas. And when we shared our information with the government, to the principal secretary of PWD and several other authorities who are obviously responsible for construction of roads, their jaws dropped, and I'm very happy to say that we got a very positive response from the government. Maharashtra alone has spent more than 250 crores to build mitigation structures on highways so that traffic can move either over or under, and animals can move. If it's a underpass, animals will go below it. If it's an overpass, animals will go above it. There are some greenfield projects that are coming up on highways, and because of the information that's there on tigers and other species, we are able to exactly pinpoint which are those areas where a mitigation structure will help actually mitigate the conflict between long-term conservation of species and development. And it's working. I am quite hopeful that other states will also take cue from this. Madhya Pradesh, of course, has already started doing this. And I would urge that other states like Goa, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, even Uttarakhand, where there are elephants, Northeast, Kaziranga, where again you have a national highway right at the fringe of Kaziranga National Park, and there are a lot of issues because of that. It's very easy to provide those mitigation measures. But who gave us that idea? The tiger, when we followed the tiger took us to a village, the tiger takes us to a farmland, the tiger takes you to an agricultural field, it will also take you to a road. And when all that data, you look at that data as one, you realize that there are ways of allowing the coexistence of large carnivores and people. And I'm very proud Indian, because I think India is at the forefront of conservation. We know as a country how to conserve our large mammals. We are also developing at a fast pace, yet India has 75% of all wild tigers, 75% of all Asian elephants, 85% of all one-horned rhinos, and 100% of all Asiatic lions. And that cannot happen without sound policy or high level of social acceptance. We are fortunate to have both. And our faith in tigers has taught us a lot about fragmentation, about forest degradation, about wildfires, about bushmeat hunting. If we take this knowledge forward and integrate it into a development policy, India has an opportunity to take an energy efficient pathway. I'm pretty hopeful that we may be able to do that. Finally, while we are in the middle of one of the worst health crises that the world has ever faced, think what COVID-19 has taught us. All those things that tigers have been telling us all these years. 1. Reduce the interface between wild animals and people by reducing consumption of wild meat. Reducing degradation so that infiltration of people into the deepest part of the forest is not possible. Reduce fragmentation. Control transmission of disease from species to species by constantly measuring what's happening in animals that we live with. And finally, keep distance from each other. Tigers are the best example of social distancing. They are solitary animals. So I'm fascinated to see how our understanding in one field can actually help solving another issue. And I'm an optimist. And I have a lot of faith in the conservation movement that we have seen in India. I can say without doubt that if tigers live into the next century, it will be largely because of India. I want to finally thank BookMyShow and Sanctuary Nature Foundation for organizing this series of talks and allowing people like us to talk to as many people as possible. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye.